so long is like alchemy.
9 days since the Warriors played. Rest versus rust, the traditional argument. I thought it was interesting. I heard Jerry West on an interview say he thought that this worked against the Warriors, despite them being an older team and a veteran team. He didn't like the big layoff. Jordan Bell getting the start, which I thought was very interesting when you consider Marc Gasol starting for Toronto as a traditional 7-footer, right? Traditional center. So Kerr kind of going against the grain, giving Bell the nod. I honestly thought it would be either Bogut or Boogie starting against Gasol, at least for the first 4 minutes, but he went Bell. Let's jump into this thing. First offensive possession, you see Klay start out on Lowry and it's Iguodala on Kawhi, but there's an unnecessary switch that happens here with Draymond and Klay. That's just not necessary right there. But fortunately, maybe some nerves and a misread from Lowry early causes a turnover, really unforced. I had talked about Steph establishing a landing zone and understanding that they were going to be physical and being uptight on him, so he draws an early foul. Steph said this is the best he's felt going into any one of these 5 finals. Watch Steph switch here on Siakam, and it's very obvious. It became very clear early on, like Steph can't switch in this series. He's going to have to fight through and stay on a guard that's on the floor. You see, whether it be Green, Lowry, or Van Vliet, Steph's going to have to fight to stay on one of those guys because it's just compromising our defense. The outlet pass, and Klay expectedly very aggressive to start this thing. So I'm guessing Kerr's thought in starting Bell was this. He's able to switch on Kawhi, right? And then perhaps run up and down and beat Gasol up and down the floor. But that's just not how it played out, right? Kawhi knocks the early 3 ball down. You see Steph feeling frisky. I believe what he says. He looks his healthiest as we've seen in these finals. Early on, though, it was the second looks off the offensive rebounds that really kept us afloat as Steph hits the reload 3 ball. Here's the scouting report on Siakam. He wants to spin back to the right hand. Draymond at least knew that, and he took that away. But we saw the counter from Siakam all night. Draymond trying to push the ball, and you're just seeing the size, right? There's a 7-footer meeting him at the rim. There's Siakam. There's Kawhi helping. The size and length bothered our finishing at the rim all night. Once again, it's Steph switched on to Siakam, and we leave Gasol butt naked at the top. That's a practice 3 ball. Surprise, surprise, turnovers early and often in this start. And watch Kawhi here. This is what I'm pointing out. This isn't a healthy Kawhi. That's very uncharacteristic. The pull-up transition 3 ball, right? And you can just see he's not moving well. But despite that, we decided to double team and trap him throughout this first half. There's Bell slicing to the hoop for, I believe, his only basket. Here's another example. Lowry pokes the ball loose, and a healthy Kawhi attacks you all the way to the rim right here. He's just not confident doing so. Now watch this. This looks like game plan to me. That looks like strategy, leaving him for that 3. And the problem is Marc Gasol, I know he's been a hesitant shooter at times, but he's too good of a shooter to just let him take wide open shots. And knowing no one's going to even put a hand up, he'll knock him down. And it took too long to adjust, frankly. There's another transition basket. And again, the switching, Steph finds himself back on Siakam, and he's very comfortable with a smaller guy on him. He understands the length advantage. Both Philly and Milwaukee had success putting a center or a big on Siakam. He loves to eat up the small guys. Watch Klay's shot here. The rotation completely off on this thing. I think he was sped up and aggressive, and we've seen Klay be like this, but when his ball's spinning like that, he's not in rhythm. I was very disappointed the Warriors didn't follow the strategy that I think all of us thought they were going to use. As you see them trap Kawhi, and then Toronto had an advantage every time. Kawhi was very willing to give the ball up because clearly he's not right, and it compromised our defense over and over again to start this game. Klay, Steph action, that's the key. I'll talk more about it later as Steph knocks his second 3 ball down. One thing Draymond did do well was he drew fouls on a lot of guys. Siakam, Gasol, Kawhi. He was very aware of trying to draw fouls, but here's where you see the length and aggression. You've got Kawhi, Siakam weak side, Lowry digging down at the ball. It's going to be a difficult task to finish in the paint against this team. Here's an outlet in Klay with an extra step and the hammer as Gasol tries to chase him down. You see Klay with the Canadian fade from Supercuts. No, it looks straight, just not his normal cut, right? Now watch this transition defense. Kyle Lowry is a downhill little guy, right? Kevon Looney needs to turn his hips and run with Lowry, but instead he just kind of moves laterally and tries to get in front of him. It's lazy, and it's just a poor decision from Kevon in transition. There were many of them on the night. Klay continued to play a bit sped up, I thought. Now watch Kawhi in this trap. Steph Curry, take note, I'm going to run it back. Watch him hold the ball and then bounce pass. I know Kawhi's bigger, but Steph, that over-the-top pass out of the trap, I think it's scouted by now. Van Vliet in the game and continues where he left off in Milwaukee series. I had also talked about Looney perhaps struggling in this series because of their length and athleticism. You see he was off balance there. And look, the Siakam thing is going to be tricky because we don't want to overreact to this game one performance. That's the scouting report. Let him shoot the above the break three. But at a certain point, you have to be dynamic and realize the dude is hot and the rules, the scouting report is out the window. Another second chance opportunity. This time it's Cook in the second unit as we see DeMarcus Cousins for the first time in nearly 2 months. The backdoor and Klay's second dunk of the half. How did Boogie look? I thought this was a telling closeout because, you want to see, does he trust his legs? This closeout on Danny Green let me know like he trusts his legs. He's going to go all out there. But now him running up and down the floor, that's just a different story. He already struggled with that when he was completely healthy, as you see Serge just killing us on the offensive glass. But the second unit needed his presence in there, to be perfectly honest with you. But here's the problem, right? He takes the jumper and then there's no chance in a foot race with any of their other bigs. Maybe Marc Gasol he can keep up with up and down the court, but certainly not Serge or Siakam. But on the other end, again, we needed his presence. He got to the line a couple times, and more importantly, he was drawing gravity to the paint, and he's, for one, the bigger body. He's like one of our only guys that has a size advantage. There he gets hit off the pick and roll, right? But take a look at this offensive possession that ends up in a Jerebko three. Boom, 1, 2, 3 defenders. So he immediately has gravity and physicality, and he got us some shots. I think if we can match his minutes with Mark being on the floor, then we don't have to worry as much about him in transition. Once again, collapsing on Kawhi, the extra pass as Patrick McCaw's in there, and Van Vliet, man, has yet to come back down to earth from behind the line. We've seen this several times. DeMarcus backpedaling off pick and roll action, digging down with his hands, and it's, look at Quinn. Okay, I see you. The and one as the second unit, I thought, held its own here. Let's take a look at more Kawhi kind of just not being himself, struggling to go to the cup. Scouting report. And then Livingston had an interesting game because he was aggressive. He was one of the only aggressive Warriors finishing at the rim. You're going to see him block Kawhi here. But he was the main culprit in our transition issues. He just didn't have a sense of urgency or awareness. Now here's Steph just choosing wrong. He comes off the pick and roll. Where do you think he should go? He veers to the help and then ends up getting trapped and turning the ball over, actually picking up a foul on Van Vliet, as Breen was saying. Now, obviously not a great game from Draymond, but look at him with the Chris Paul move, picking up another foul on Kawhi, and he was 6 of 6 from the free throw line, so I think that's something to build on. He knows he's got to be better, right? And then Klay, he magically always winds up kind of efficient, right? Despite how he starts, as he hit 3 of 6 from downtown, and then pick and roll in the middle of the floor. A lot of this pick and roll action was to the corner, and you're really putting Steph in a bind with Big Gasol and how aggressive they were. Trapping him, the sideline becomes another defender. Let me add to that by setting it even higher, as you see on this next possession. Draymond actually does it in the backcourt, and it just gives Steph more room to operate. And he didn't get the early whistle. He got some late whistles that made it look better, but early on there were a lot of missed calls. Kawhi, no sir in the mid-range. And this was part of the rust, right? You saw they were mistimed on a lot of passes, some backdoor ones, some cutting passes, and just some simple stuff like that. The transition defense and the timing of their passes, I think, is where the rust showed most. More Siakam just right over the top of Draymond. That's something he'll be able to do over and over again, unfortunately. Iguodala, one of the rare times we actually turned the corner and got downhill with no one at the front of the rim. Here's what I'm talking about with Siakam. We can't overreact to that. Look, we can't let him have it wide open, but we still can't go flying at him when he catches at the three-point line now, because that's what he ultimately wants. And this is the counter. Don't let him get to the right hand. Well, he started to score with the left hand, just using the length more. And look, I don't want to gripe about it too much, but this is what happens. Toronto at home, they're going to get the favorable whistle. The block call there, that was a bad one. But I think overall, the whistles weren't as bad as I think like NBA Twitter and everybody's making it. They definitely got the favorable whistle, but it wasn't like terribly shocking, right? Van Vliet and Steph switches on to Gasol. Again, this needs to change because it's going to compromise our defense. We're always scrambling. And Steph's just got to do a better job of fighting and staying out on the perimeter, in my opinion. Half winding down, and Danny Green, the Warrior killer. I don't think he had made a three in like 2 rounds in the playoffs. Splashes that one down. Halftime, you see Slim greeting his teammates. You wonder what's going on in his mind as he's watching them struggle in this game 1. Interesting that he even made the trip, right? Second half, more Siakam. Draymond, he's sitting on that right-hand spin move, right? You see how he hits him with the little smitty and then scoops with the left hand? He can do that. Like, that is sustainable, and that's a problem. Speaking of problems, Gasol, much more of a problem than I thought he would be, even on the defensive end, his size. And now, this is what's not sustainable, right? That's what you have to live with. If Draymond overreacts to that, he's going to continue to kill us. Watch this Steph Clay action. Off ball. That's going to be the key because it causes some indecision with their defense. This other pick and roll action, the Raptors could care less about the screener. When it's Steph and Clay, they all of a sudden, there's some indecision about who to stick with. Here's another phantom call as Siakam gets to the front of the rim. But one thing Toronto did is, look, just go up and finish. And I think Bell can make the adjustment as what did he play about 12 minutes here? He started both halves. But Bell was trying to like shoot around the shot blockers. Just go up and try to finish. If it's a foul, if it's a foul, if you make it, you make it. But when you hesitate and try to do something you're not accustomed to, you're playing into their length. If Marc Gasol's going to come out that high on the floor, we need to run more slip action with our bigs. You see Bell not recognizing where the clock was. It'll be interesting to see if we see much more of Bell in this series. We may not have a choice with the injuries continuing to pile up. Now, 9 offensive rebounds led to a bunch of second point opportunities, in particular for Steph and Clay, but there's a cost to everything. And looking to hit the offensive glass perhaps cost us in some of that transition defense. Here's just a bad sight, man. We talked about this a bit. Iguodala, where he's at with the 3 ball, and he's due to make some. He didn't make any in the 3 games in the conference finals. That thing didn't even hit the rim. And then this is where Siakam really shines. Here's an adjustment Steph can make. He needs to get rid of the ball quicker off these traps. Now, they may change their strategy and start to show, but there hasn't been any showing. There's a full-on trap every time he comes off the screen, so he doesn't need to drag this dribble out to see if they're trapping. It's a trap, Steph, so move it a little sooner. You see how he drags it out, and it just makes the angle of the pass much more difficult, and it's Siakam sliding down the court for another easy one. More Steph and Clay screen action. Again, causing indecision. It's pick your poison. These other screeners, they could care less if they roll or catch the ball. And that's also where perhaps Boogie could come into play in some pick and roll action because he seemed to have some gravity against this team. Gasol, just too big for Looney in the paint. Again, here's a screen action with Looney. Look at them sell out on Steph's shot. They could care less what Looney's doing. His screen is basically deemed ineffective. And then Siakam again. Draymond's going to have to challenge the ball at his waist. It just being in front of him clearly isn't enough to stop him when he has a head full of steam. And they barely wanted to call the foul. A lot of late whistles in this thing. But despite Siakam looking like prime Sean Marion, we're still hanging around. You see Livingston finish again aggressively at the rim, and we cut this thing down to 5, despite all the turnovers, the poor shooting, the poor transition defense, but then Kawhi with just a silencer, right? That 3 ball pushed it back up 8 with just under 3 minutes to go here in this third quarter. But then how about Alfonso McKinney, 2 threes in 8 minutes against his former team? I expect him to be starting game 2. I'll tell you why at the end of this video. Kawhi, clock winding down, dribbling, trying to get more aggressive here. And he kind of puts McCaw in a bad spot. And Patty fucking Mayonnaise hits the biggest shot of the night up to that point. And I'm sure between quarters went and tweeted about it. I think one of the silver linings from this game was how the second unit performed. They opened up the fourth quarter, and you see Jerebko hit a 3, and they kind of kept us hanging around. You're going to see Boogie again dig down on that pick and roll pass he loves to do. And the second unit, like they didn't kill us in this. It was the starters that got outplayed in this game as you see Boogie get to the line again. More DeMarcus creating good shots, and this was kind of the turning point here of this game. A chance to cut this thing to 2. Clanks off, Siakam runs out, and there's nothing Cook can do there, and it's a 5-point swing, pushing that thing back up to 7. Here's a possession where you could just see their length and defensive pressure just bothering the Warriors. No one wanted to shoot the ball, right? It was just an ugly possession, and it was one of those ones that was just magnified like, damn, their length and defense is amazing, and Siakam could do no wrong. The blind running hook over 2 defenders, and at this point you're like, all right, the writing's on the wall, right? This doesn't look good, and that's a bad call. To me, it wasn't that there were so many whistles, it was the timing of the whistles. So many momentum-killing whistles, and then this is where you just see the normal passes that work, you have to make an extra one. right? The normal tic-tac-toe passing that works against most defenses, Toronto forcing them to make an extra pass, and they just weren't comfortable doing it. But if you're Toronto, I think the thing you got to be most excited about is this dude Danny Green showing up, right? That's a whole nother piece, a whole nother starter that you can hopefully rely on to make a decent amount of shots. Out of the timeout, this is what we're going to see more of is the slipping of our big. If Gasol's going to play out above the three-point line, this time it's Looney beating him to the front of the rim. So here we go, 10-point game, ISO pick and roll at the top and dig down. Iguodala's going to get the turnover, but I want you to notice how gingerly he finishes that shot, right? Kawhi had a relatively quiet night. He had 8 assists because of all the trapping, but it was the timing of his baskets. Remember the big one to put him back up 8, and then this one to push it back up double digits halfway through this fourth quarter. Draymond tried to get downhill, tried to be aggressive. Again, it's not the same thing. That's not Mo Harkless. That's not Al-Farouq Aminu at the rim. Here's another questionable call where you could really call this on every possession. You consider the physicality of NBA Finals basketball, and it was like, all right, well, the home team's getting the home whistle. But here's the problem with this strategy, man. This trapping strategy is, if we wanted to make Kawhi expend himself and have the strategy of playing him one-on-one, we've wasted an entire game. He officially got through game 1 without really having to exert much energy. As you see the trap, he just passes it off, and then this was just the nail in the coffin, the rattling off glass 3 ball. As I had mentioned before, Steph got a bunch of free throws here late that made things look better as far as the no calls on him. But here's the problem. Steph had 34 points. Steph played good, but only 5 assists when you consider they were trapping him the entire game means no one else was knocking down shots for him, and then this happens. Iguodala grabs the hamstring. I pointed out he looked ginger on the open finish with no one around, and then he grabs the hammy. Now, I know that he said he's going to play and he's fine. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. We've talked about hamstrings too much on here. You guys know how I feel. I'm not buying it. It's a huge loss, and that's why I said I expect McKinney to be starting game 2 in Toronto. Here's another crazy call. Look, I'm showing you these bad calls because I know a lot of you were frustrated and upset about it. To me, I think we wouldn't have won the game anyway. I think Toronto outplayed us. And yeah, it helped that they got the whistles, but Toronto deserved the game, and they got the game. And then Drake makes the mistake of poking the bear after one win. That may come back to haunt him. I'm just going to leave that there. Look, I know a lot of you are going to point to some of the freakish shots that they rattled in and just some of the out-of-characteristic things that happened in this game, and that's fine. I agree. We can't expect Toronto. This is probably their best offensive performance that we're going to see. But the defense travels. That defense is a problem, and if you looked at the shot attempts we were getting, it's a problem. We need Durant. Let's listen to Pascal after the game of his life.
Consistent throughout the playoffs. What is making this group so good defensively right now?
We have a lot of bodies. We got guys that are just willing to move and play defense, and we use it to our advantage. And I think we're doing a pretty decent job. There's some possession there. We made some mistakes, but for the most part, we play solid.
How does a young man experiencing basically his first playoff run in his first NBA Finals handle the pressure and perform as you did tonight?
Just doing it for my dad, man. Doing it for my dad. Going out there every single night, not worrying about whatever's going on. Just have a bigger purpose.
Pascal, it's not just Toronto. It feels like you have an entire country behind you. What is it like to feel the love from this group?
It's amazing, man. Best fans in the NBA. Just at this moment, we just want to continue to do what we do, and hopefully, we'll get it done. So tonight, game 1, we did what we're supposed to do. Game 2.
You can expect a response because you are playing against champions. How do you sustain what you did tonight? What are the keys to that?
I think, we just got to stay solid, man. It's a great team we're playing against. It's going to be tough. We just got to continue to play, be ourselves, and they're going to make adjustments, and we got to be ready for that.
Thank you, Pascal.
Thank you.
I've been winning so long, it's like alchemy.